Hi, everybody. This is Aaron Schwartz, one of the secondary math specialists with Montgomery County Public Schools. This video is called Vexing Vending Machines, and it's an introduction to functions and the definition of functions for students in Algebra 1. In Unit 2, Topic 1, the students learn to express relationships as functions. Some of the key ideas include that functions are rules that assign each input to exactly one output. Now, this is repeated in two different standards. It's repeated in the 8th grade function standards, and then again in the interpreting function standards. Now, unlike past videos, the skills that students have coming into this are actually pretty limited. If students took Math 8, the definition of a function is content with which they are familiar. However, they have not used the function notation f of x. But if students are coming from IM as their previous course, this is actually their first introduction to functions. So let's start talking about functions and what they are, but let's put it in the context of vending machines. We've all been to those vending machines where the candy or the chips are lined up and you put in the money and sometimes the bags get caught. So this is something where a lot of students can relate and can make that connection to the fact that sometimes things don't function properly. So let's start with the story. Jen, Precious, Mark, and Chris are relaxing at the pool. Each decides to get a snack from the vending machine. Each pushes a button and gets candy. We're going to reveal what they got, but we want students to notice as they're looking at the table and start talking about what they notice. So Jen pushes button number 1, and she gets a Twix bar. Precious pushes button number 2, and she gets M&Ms. Mark pushes button number 2, and he gets Snickers. Chris pushes button number 3, and he gets 3 Musketeers. One of the things that students will notice is that button number 2 produced 2 different candies. And they may say it in exactly those terms. And this is where we say this is not a function. We can actually say that this machine does not function. An input cannot have different outputs. In this machine, inputting button number 2 produces 2 different outputs or 2 different candies. And we can get into a conversation about the fact that when we talk about a function, it has to be predictable. We need to be able to say that when you put in 2, you're always going to get out Snickers or you're always going to get out M&Ms. It can't be random which one you'll get. So now let's look at another example. So this is story time part 2, and Jen, Precious, Mark, and Chris are relaxing at the pool again the next day. They each decide to go to another machine. Each pushes a button and gets candy. So let's see what they'll notice. Jen pushed button number 1, and again, today she got Twix. Precious pushed button number 2, and again today, she got M&Ms. Mark pushed button number 3, and he got Snickers. Chris pushed button number 4, and he also got Snickers. And likely they're going to notice that buttons number 3 and buttons number 4 produce the same result. However, we can say that this machine functions because it is possible that the machine has 2 different buttons linked to Snickers, 2 different inputs linked to the same output. So this machine functions because even though buttons 3 and 4 both produce Snickers, we know that button 3 always produces Snickers and button 4 always produces Snickers. We don't have that issue where sometimes we get one result and sometimes we get a different result. So a typical assessment item is asking students to identify which one is not the function and why. So in this case, we have 2 graphs. Which one is not the function and why? And the answer is B, but there's something very important. When students express that answer B is not the function, they have to be able to explain that there is a domain value, in this case 4, with multiple range values. In other words, there's an input of 4, and 4 has two different outputs, 3 and 4. This is really important. They need to explain their answer in terms of the input and output, or domain and range. And that's because the vertical line test does not appear anywhere in the Common Core state standards. It's actually a shorthand way to test a graph, but it's not the reason why something is or is not a function. The reason it is not a function and the expectation is that students are able to explain their understanding about functions in terms of input and output, or domain and range. The idea that B is not a function because there's an input with multiple outputs. Let's take a look at another example. Which relation is not a function? We have two different tables of values. The domain X and the range Y for table A. So we have 2 and -2, 2 and 0, 3 and -2, and 4 and 0. Students may notice immediately that choice A has a domain value, in this case 2, matched with multiple range values. And they need to be able to explain it in exactly those terms. There's a value of the domain with multiple range values, or there's an input value with multiple output values. The idea of writing as a response, the X values repeat, does not actually meet the expectations of the Common Core state standards for mathematics. The expectation is that students understand those functions in terms of the input, output, or domain and range. I hope this video helps teachers create classrooms where students explore math, observe patterns, and develop conceptual understanding. If you have questions, comments, or have a video idea, please email me at the address below.